Welcome everyone to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security policies to guide the state of Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing to allow us to bring you a bit behind the headlines here in Israel. It's a great pleasure to be joined again by Danny Seaman. Danny, thank you so much for joining.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about, Danny. There have been a lot of updates, a lot of developments in the war, even since yesterday. So I'll let you begin sharing with our viewers a little bit about what's happened in Syria, in the north of Israel, and what's happening in the south of Israel in Eilat to start with.
I think today, more than any other day, shows that this is a multi-faceted, multi-dimensional conflict that all focuses on one thing. This is a war, and Hamas, Hezbollah, elements in Iraqi elements in Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, they're all puppets of the real battle that's going on here, which is Iran. And we know that Hamas are in connection and directed by Iran. We know, obviously, Hezbollah is, if you know the background of Hezbollah, they are Shia. The Iranians also support the Assad regime in Syria, the minority regime which controls Syria, and there's been a civil war there, that the same people that are marching in the streets, nobody talks about the genocide that was committed there only a few years ago. So this past 24 hours put the focus on the fact that this is basically a battle between Israel, which represents the Western world. Let there be no mistake about this. Iran is fighting the Sunni world, is fighting Israel, and they've always said that. Again, just like Hamas with Israel. They make it very clear that they're fighting the West, and Israel is just the closest to them. So they've developed these proxies around us in Lebanon, in Syria, in south of Saudi Arabia, in Yemen. All these bodies are fighting against us. The amazing thing yesterday, perhaps, was that there was a secret meeting, a very highly secret meeting being held in a region in Syria, which is under the Iranian proxies' control. And one of the top people there, the person responsible for the Jerusalem brigades of the Iranian forces in Syria, his deputy and a few others, they say that this was the highest ranking official since Soleimani. And I will quote the great words of the great President Trump: he died like a dog. And he was taken out with 5 missiles by an F-35 unidentified aircraft. The United States said it's not them. They weren't aware of it. So your guess is, anybody's guess is as good as mine. But anyway, they were planning something against the state of Israel. I think the good thing about this, if indeed it was Israel involved in this, is that one of the lessons of October 7th is we no longer take things for granted. If we know there are plans being made, we have to strike before those plans can be taken out against Israel. So this is a major incident that occurred. The Iranians are obviously accusing Israel. They're saying it was a wretched attack and a horrible attack and an inhumane attack. I can just tell you this: there are elements in Syria who are fighting, among the Sunni majority in Syria, who are fighting the Iranians, and they were celebrating today. So it tells you exactly who this man is and what what is really happening here in the Middle East. All people have to do is stop listening to propaganda and look to what people are saying. The Syrian population are celebrating this. So this man was taken out, and the Iranians are promising retaliation, either through them or through Hezbollah. We have to see. Look, we're in a multi-arena war, and we're taking the initiative now, which is very important for Israel. This follows up, and I'm sure the briefing yesterday referred to the fact that the events at the Shifa hospital were concluded. What is important in Shifa is not only the taking out of dozens of high-ranking Hamas terrorist officials, but also the fact that we got invaluable intelligence on many facets. And I think even beyond that, I think we spoke about this last week, that while so much is being spoken about and talked about, and too much is being talked about the battle, here we see that some things that Israel is doing, they're successful in doing things that are secret and highly secret in this case. I just know that one of the experts said that, an American expert said that what Israel did in general, what is happening in Gaza, but especially in the Shifa hospital, will be taught in schools of infantry because it was such an amazing battle, but we can't release the information at the moment. But we also got invaluable intelligence that will help us, and this the Prime Minister himself said, that will help us when we turn our sights on Rafah, which should be very soon. So those two things are very important in this battle. In addition, Israel, there was a training exercise being conducted in Eilat. For those of you who don't know, it's the south of Israel. It's in the Red Sea, borders with Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Jordan. And while this exercise was being conducted, there was an explosion, and apparently an unmanned aircraft from Yemen exploded nearby. So in addition to missiles being fired to the north of Israel, you have the incident in Syria, you have the incident in the south of Israel, and of course, things going on in Gaza, all this in the past 24 hours. That is the battlefield, the physical battlefield. And those of you who have been following us, and especially when I'm on, I also speak about the other battlefield, which is the cognitive warfare and battlefield. And two things of substance occurred in the past 24 hours in that battlefield. One is the fact that the law in Israel to shut down Al Jazeera, or it's not, we know it's because of Al Jazeera, but it's basically against any media outlet that serves the enemy. This law was passed in the Knesset yesterday by a very broad majority. Not only members of the coalition, but also members of the opposition voted for this in the second and third vote, and the law was passed and will be presented in the upcoming days, in which the government has, under emergency law, the ability to shut down any media outlet that they believe is behaving in a manner that endangers Israel. And obviously Al Jazeera is. Al Jazeera is the spokes organization for not only for Hamas or Hezbollah, but for the jihad movement of the Muslim Brotherhood. So it's good that Israel is going to do this. Now, this is the area that I dealt with for many years, and I can say this, when I was head of the government press office 20 years ago, I was already addressing these issues, not only with Al Jazeera, but others. I'm not optimistic, because the fact that Israel is a democratic country with freedom of speech and of media, the fact that we physically shut them down is more, it's technical. They can stand with their camera just like anybody and report from anywhere in Israel. If they want to be serious about this and let them know, there should be fines. There should be, not only for them, but also if any, well, back 20 years ago, you needed the satellite companies to help them air and broadcast. Today, you can do it with your mobile phone. But we have to make it very clear that if they continue working for them, that anybody providing them with content could be, legal action can be taken against them. And perhaps Israel will also consider suing them and other media organizations for the involvement of persons employed by them in the activities of October 7th and the participation with Hamas. I can go into a whole issue about this and their involvement. Just simply put, that when you're under control of Hamas, nobody can work there independently, only people who have the agreement. And we know that many of them were Hamas activists and Hamas terrorists employed by Hamas working for these media outlets. Another incident, another event yesterday was the government is considering suing UNRWA. The Prime Minister said that they will remove, if necessary, anybody who was involved and is found to have been involved in October 7th among the UNRWA employees. And we know from the testimony of several of the women that were released that they were held captive in the homes of UNRWA employees, that Israel will remove the diplomatic immunity that they have, and we plan to sue them for this. And there will be a lot of developments on this particular issue. And finally, in that area of the cognitive warfare, there was an unfortunate incident yesterday in which one of the human rights groups that are providing food to the Arabs in Gaza, WCK, the World, you told me the name, I wasn't clear on the name, the World Cooking Kitchen, or?
World Central Kitchen.
World Central Kitchen, okay. One of the civilian, which are genuine humanitarian groups. Unfortunately, they were caught in an incident, and an Israeli aircraft fired and killed 5 of their members. The IDF spokesman, just about an hour ago, gave a briefing in which he apologized for the incident. The IDF will be investigating it. All fine and nice. I personally am really very unhappy, to put it diplomatically, about the IDF spokesman doing this. I can give from my personal experience. 40 years ago, I was a paratrooper. 41 years ago, I was a paratrooper in the war in Lebanon, and with the 890th. And when we fought in the town of Damour in Lebanon, our first casualties were caused by an Israeli aircraft, which fired, didn't know that our forces were in a particular location, and fired and killed 5 of our fellow members of the 890th. So these kind of things, mistakes happen in the battlefield. This was obviously a mistake. Israel has no interest in firing at these civilian humanitarian groups. We should have made it very clear that this is unfortunate. Of course, we have to investigate so these things don't recur, but to file an apology for it, and I understand that the Wall Street Journal already, it's amazing how these media outlets can immediately write about this and show their concern, and there's outcry internationally. Tomorrow will be 180 days in which Israeli civilians, children, men, elderly, and women are being held hostage by Hamas, by a terrorist group. The women and the men, by the way, as well, are being sexually harassed and sexually assaulted every day. And all these organizations are silent. And to me, what the IDF spokesman should have said when approached about this issue was, yes, we'll investigate. What are you doing? To whoever approaches him on this issue, what are you doing about our hostages? How are you helping us? How are you making an outcry, an international outcry over this? And with all due respect to all these organizations and to the governments abroad who are so concerned about the Arabs in Gaza, none of this would have happened if they hadn't been holding our civilians hostage, which every day they wake up to this tremendous atrocity, and they're all silent because it's acceptable when it's Jews. And in a few weeks, we'll be commemorating Holocaust Memorial Day. With all due respect to all these hypocrites, who'll be the first ones to commemorate the Holocaust. When Jews are being assaulted today, where are you? So don't talk to me about these humanitarian organizations. None of this would have happened had Hamas not assaulted Israel. So first talk to me about our civilians being held, and then we'll arrange that. But that's me. Unfortunately, the IDF spokesman, and I say that one thing that bothers me with the Israeli government is that under any circumstances, we're not making this the first issue. What about our hostages? And just on that particular issue, there are talks going on in Cairo. Israel sent a delegation. They were returning home today after Israel accepted. Now, Hamas were not present. Even their representatives from Qatar were not present in Cairo. They were being represented by the Egyptians and the Qataris and the United States. And Israel was willing to accept some arrangements and changes that were made. We accepted the proposal last week. So anybody accusing the government or Israel for not trying, at least through the diplomatic way, of addressing the issue of our hostages, they're full of it, because we're even, and there will be consequences for Israel eventually, and yet the majority of the population will accept the government doing this. But the issue is, and let's be frank about this, Hamas don't really care. They take much more pleasure in tormenting us than to really receiving. And part of this is because they believe that there's going to be international pressure that will tie the hands of Israel, and that Israel will eventually neither attack Rafah or we'll end the war. And for them, they say, well, all we have to do is wait because they have all the indication that this is going to happen. So on the cognitive battlefield, I think right now we're at a little disadvantage. On the battlefield itself, some very important things and good things for Israel have occurred in the past 24 hours.
Danny, thank you for sharing all of that. You are certainly the expert in public diplomacy. So I'll ask you, I know you don't read the New York Times, so you would have no idea what it says there, but the front headline says, Netanyahu calls strike that killed 7 aid workers tragic and unintentional. And so, Danny, let me ask you, if the government, if the spokesperson, if the prime minister did not speak up, would that headline have been buried and the New York Times would be covering other news, or would it paint a more accusatory picture of what's happening here in Israel?
It is very unfortunate that civilians are being killed. But first off, let's stress one thing. Experts on urban warfare and on modern warfare since, I would say since after World War II, I think even more since the end of the Vietnam War, there is what the West calls acceptable casualties among civilians. Now, all these laws about warfare that govern warfare since World War II, they address the issue of 2 countries battling each other. What we are doing and what the United States and the Western countries discovered after 9/11 is that these terrorist organizations and non-governmental and non-country elements are hiding behind the civilians and using them in the battlefield. So they reach some kind of acceptable understanding that this is not the kind of warfare that we addressed when international laws were created. There should be about a 5-to-1 for every armed person or terrorist or killed, or for every 5 of them, 1 civilian. That's sort of that number is acceptable. All the experts say that Israel is creating a standard that they don't believe the Western world can meet, meaning we're 1.5, 2, maybe 3, if we exaggerate a little. So even this, Israel is creating sort of the standard because it's impossible. They're hiding behind and using the civilians. And when it comes to Gaza, we know very clearly the civilians are cooperating. Those of you who met my son here a few months ago when he spoke after coming back from Gaza, he says how every house has munitions and a tunnel, because this way, the terrorists themselves, when they go from one place to the other, they know exactly where to find weapons, where to find ammunition, because they know this is the way it was planned. So the civilians were cooperating. I doubt in their particular case, I'm not going to be naive here, they were not doing this under duress. They were doing this because they believe in what Hamas was doing. So we have circumstances that none of these Western countries have to deal with. So in this particular case, Israel is doing more than what Western, but still we get criticized for this. So if you ask me, and putting this in the context of the New York Times, the fact that 5 members of an international aid organization were killed, again, I say unfortunate, even if we hadn't said anything, this would be the big issue, because all these organizations are looking for the opportunity to condemn and criticize the state of Israel, many of them, because of their left-wing ideological support of terrorist organizations and elements. They masquerade it behind this call for Palestine, whatever that means, and for freeing Palestine, and using their terminology, which is genocidal against Israel. That issue, they ignore that fact, the irony of that. So I doubt that the New York Times was certainly a part of that extreme left-wing element would have changed anything. I believe that, unfortunately, the fact that both the prime minister and the IDF spokesman spoke out about it in such a way, I think it just lends this, it just continues. Because this would have been a headline today for the New York Times, and tomorrow they would have moved on to something else. Instead, we now have, Israel accepted responsibility for it. They could have very easily put out a second-level spokesperson who would have said the things that it's unfortunate and put things in perspective and left it at that. They chose to do this. Always in the battlefield, the cognitive warfare, the information warfare, we constantly continue with these same kind of mistakes.
Interestingly, this incident in Gaza has buried the other story, which is maybe the more significant story in the totality of this war, as you mentioned, about the airstrike in Syria. And just talking about that for a minute, what do you think we can anticipate in terms of retaliation from Iran or an uptick in the north?
Well, my expertise is more with diplomacy and public diplomacy and hasbara, as it's called. I can use my experience over the years. Look, the Iranians are not interested in conducting an all-out war with Israel. Certainly right now, when they're on the verge of developing nuclear weapons. I don't know what they're going to do afterwards, but at the moment, they'd much rather not draw attention. And that's been the whole way they've conducted their warfare since the rise of the Ayatollahs and the extreme Shia Islam in Iran. Their first battle was, we know, those of us old enough to remember, the Iran-Iraq war. But Iraq was just the first stage. And by the way, they've succeeded in taking over Iraq. They control everything in Iraq today. The Shia in Iraq, who are a minority there as well, control Iraq. So they are using these proxies so they don't get their hands dirty. Not only for the purpose of protecting their effort to develop nuclear weapons, but I think it's more practical in the sense that, first off, they all remember the Iran-Iraq war. And second, they have a problem within Iran itself. The public there, to a large degree, oppose this regime. And they're being beaten down by the Iranian Ayatollahs, but they may not get a lot of support for this. And it may be a war going on in Iran, and affecting the public there will not go over very well. So they're trying to keep that at bay. Will they have to? Yes, just like they did with Soleimani when the United States took him out. They responded with firing something, and it wasn't that serious, but they were able to show and save face. So I would say, if we're lucky, that may be the situation here. It could be resolved in something far more, but I think Israel is fully aware of that, and we have to keep our guard up. That's basically what's going on, and we are in war mode for the past 6 months. We're fully aware of this, but I think what is really important about what happened there in Syria is sending them a very clear message. The gloves are off with Israel. We're no longer, if we have any concern that you're planning something, and that's basically what was going on with the Iranians at the moment, we'll take them out before they succeed in doing that. Now, again, I say we take them out where nobody's taken official responsibility for this. So it's just our assessment of it. So I assume they're going to do something at least so that gives them the ability to say, look what we did. Hard to say what is going to happen.
Danny, you have spent your career standing up for Israel, fighting against Jew hatred and anti-Semitism in the media. So to make it very practical for an issue that is unfolding right now, in Teaneck, New Jersey, there was just a pro-Hamas rally. And I don't know if you saw any of the videos. It certainly did not look pleasant. And I'm wondering if you could give some advice to our viewers, maybe who are sitting right now in Teaneck, New Jersey, or elsewhere in the States, and want to know what is the best way to stand up to these Hamas protesters who are spouting hatred and going into Jewish communities in order to do that.
Well, first of all, I see somebody who's very desperate to get an answer here regarding the fact that Israel should nuke or not nuke Iran. Israel has never admitted to having nuclear weapons, so officially, if we don't officially have nuclear weapons, there is no way that we can nuke Iran. So it's no way to address that question. So we'll leave that there. I hope I satisfied the person's request. Listen, TDEC is not the issue. It's an expression of what is happening. American Jews, regardless of your political positions, unless you're completely those morons and the children of Capo, who are thinking that joining the Hamas, they don't understand nobody. And this is what they forget, that on October 7th, when they entered what they called settlements, which are even the international community recognizes as Israeli territory, they entered the kibbutzim, they called it all settlements, and they murdered, raped, beheaded, burnt children, men, women, assaulted them in every demonic possible way. They never stopped once to ask any of them, what are your political positions? Do you support? Are you for Palestine, against Palestine? Some of these families participated in the joint Memorial Day, which I don't know why they choose to do it on Israel Memorial Day. But some of these were participants. One of the kibbutzim held an annual ceremony to commemorate both the victims on both sides. Others would drive Gazan children to hospitals to be treated in Israeli hospitals in Haifa. One of them was held hostage and recently released. Another is still being held. They murdered some of them, so they didn't care. So what people have to understand, Jews have to understand, this is an assault on us as Jews. Now, you don't have to believe me. Listen to what the jihadists are saying. And all those people marching in the streets, and I'm not talking about the Western useful idiots. I'm talking of those who are either from Muslim countries or descendants of families from Muslim countries. They're all fulfilling the demand of jihad. They don't hide it. There's no two ways about it. There's on our side, there are people who say, no, they don't really mean it. Yes, they do. And they continue to say it. And it's not only the Jews in the United States. As always, the Jews are the canaries. So hopefully, Jews in Teaneck, regardless of their political affiliation, will understand that this is anti-Semitism against them. Now, the United States itself owes every civilian the protection under the law. And when you have the media that are not screaming bloody murder right now about what is happening with American Jews, it is outrageous. Those who know how quickly to stand up for the Gazans today are not standing up for American citizens. Where is the New York Times on this? Where are they now speaking against what is happening and the assault against Jews? The same people who are so quick to tell us, not all Muslims are terrorists. Not all Muslims support 9/11. You can't blame all the Muslims for the actions of a few terrorists, are the first ones to blame all Jews for what apparently Israel is doing. Now, I'm not even going to go in and justify or defend or not defend what Israel is doing. It's regardless. Israel is responsible for itself. An American Jew, by religion, may support Israel just the way as the Irish can support Ireland. Germans can support Germany. But God forbid a Jew supports the state of Israel. So you have to stand up. These demonstrating against you, fine, but it has to be, you have to start putting pressure. It's an election year. There's a lot of Jews and a lot of Jews who contribute. Start speaking out and get your allies who are so quick to demand you and very happy to get your money for transgender nonsense, for all this other crap that the woke population is so quick to. Where is your protection for American Jews? I would also say for the Black community. The Black community, the Jews were always the first ones to stand up and defend. I grew up in the South in the United States in the 60s. I was the first generation to go to school with Black children. I remember one of the things as an 8-year-old, that my mother being asked, oh, you're Danny's son, you're Danny's mother? You know your son plays with the Negro kids? Because my mom was from Jerusalem, from Israel. She brought me up treating everybody equally. But I remember that. And I remember my mother telling me how proud she was that the Jews were standing out for the Black community in the United States. Where are they today? I'm not saying they don't have to support Israel. Don't support us. We don't need your support. But they should be supporting their Jewish friends and neighbors. So this is where you should be, because it's not about Israel anymore. It's about your lives as Americans, your freedom as Jews, your freedom to support or not support Israel. It's regardless of what Israel does. And that, unfortunately, the media has been supporting this, and also all these influencers are social media. So practically, I would try to ignore them. But I think, the other thing is, one reason a lot of people don't mouth off to Black and Hispanics in the United States is because they're afraid. because they know if you stand up and you start assaulting Black people or Hispanic people, you're going to get the crap kicked out of you. And I think it's high time American Jews start realizing that we're no longer these helpless, defenseless Jews. And just like the state of Israel knows how to defend itself, American Jews have to start concentrating on that. I think we've gone over time.
Danny, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure having you join and hearing your views, the unfiltered, uncensored. Danny Seaman, thank you so much for joining. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern time for another briefing. Till then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.